Hannah Miller was 13 when she learned how heavy silence could be. It sat between her and her little sister Lucy every night, thick and unspoken, filling the cheap motel room where they'd been living for months. The kind of silence that came after too many unanswered questions, after too many promises that never came true. Their father had been missing for 4 years. No body, no goodbye, just gone. Hannah had learned not to ask adults about him anymore. Social workers always gave the same tired look, sympathetic, distant, already moving on to the next file. Lucy still asked sometimes in a small, hopeful voice, usually at night, "Do you think Dad knows where we are?" Hannah always answered the same way. "Of course he does." She wasn't sure she believed it. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday afternoon, slipped under the door like it didn't want to be noticed. A legal envelope. Official, heavy with words Hannah barely understood. It said their father had been declared legally dead. It said there was property, a house, left to them. A house. Lucy smiled for the first time in weeks. Does that mean we finally get to stay somewhere? Hannah swallowed. Hope was dangerous. Still, it was all they had. The house stood at the edge of a forgotten town, surrounded by leafless trees and cracked pavement. It looked tired, abandoned, like it had been waiting too long for someone who never came back. Paint peeled from the siding. The porch sagged slightly in the middle. Windows stared out dark and hollow, as if the house were watching them instead. "This place feels wrong," Lucy whispered, clutching Hannah's jacket. Hannah felt it too, a tight, uneasy pull in her chest. But she forced her voice to stay steady. She had learned to be resilient, guarded, determined far too young. "It's just old," she said. "Old doesn't mean bad." But when Hannah unlocked the door, a cold, stale air rushed out to meet them. The smell of dust, damp wood, and something faintly metallic lingered inside. The house creaked under their steps, reacting to their presence like it hadn't been meant to wake up. Hannah stepped in first, protective and alert. Lucy followed, eyes wide, sensitive to every sound. Somewhere deep inside the house, something shifted. And for the first time since their father disappeared, Hannah wondered if coming here had been a mistake, or if this house held the answer to everything they'd been missing. Night came faster than Hannah expected. The house didn't have real lights yet, just a single lamp they'd brought from the motel and a weak bulb flickering in the kitchen. Shadows stretched along the walls, restless and unfamiliar, as if the house were slowly learning their shapes. Hannah tried to make it feel normal. She laid out their sleeping bags in the living room, close together. She told Lucy stories they used to hear when Dad was still around. Safe stories, gentle ones. But Lucy wasn't listening. She kept staring down the hallway. "Did you hear that?" Lucy whispered. Hannah held her breath. At first there was nothing, then, creak. The sound came from above them, slow, deliberate, like a careful step on old wood. "It's just the house settling," Hannah said quickly, though her pulse jumped. She forced a confident smile, practiced and protective. "Old houses make noise." Lucy nodded, but her eyes stayed wide, uneasy, intuitive in a way that scared Hannah more than any sound. They tried to sleep. The air felt colder as the hours passed. The smell Hannah noticed earlier, dust mixed with something sharp and metallic, seemed stronger now. Around midnight, the lamp flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. That was when Lucy sat up. "Hannah," she whispered, "someone's talking." Hannah's heart hammered. "No one's here," she said, but her voice shook. Lucy pointed toward the kitchen. "From down there." Hannah stood, every nerve alert, every instinct screaming to protect. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped carefully across the creaking floor. The beam caught peeling wallpaper, an old family photo on the wall. Its glass cracked, the man's face scratched out, their father's face. Hannah froze. Lucy's voice trembled behind her. "Why would someone do that?" Before Hannah could answer, a sharp click echoed through the house. The basement door, previously closed, was now slightly open. A cold draft brushed Hannah's legs, carrying the faint scent of rust and mold. Her stomach tightened with a deep, unsettling dread. "We're not going down there," Hannah said firmly, turning back toward Lucy. But Lucy wasn't looking at the door anymore. She was staring at the kitchen floor. "There," Lucy said softly. Between two loose floorboards, something glinted in the flashlight's beam. A small, rusted key, half hidden, waiting. Hannah bent down slowly, her hands trembling as she picked it up. It felt heavier than it should have. And in that moment, she understood one terrifying truth. This house wasn't empty. It had been waiting. Hannah didn't sleep at all that night. She sat awake, the rusted key clenched in her palm, listening to the house breathe around them. Every creak felt intentional. Every shadow felt watchful. When morning finally arrived, gray and reluctant, the fear hadn't faded. It had settled deeper. Lucy noticed it right away. "You're holding it like it might disappear," she said quietly. Hannah looked down at the key, old, heavy, purposeful. It didn't belong to a child's house or a child's life. After breakfast, Hannah tried to convince herself to ignore it, to stay upstairs, to wait. But curiosity pressed against her fear, persistent and insistent. By noon, she gave in. The basement door resisted at first, swollen with age. Hannah slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The door opened with a low groan that echoed down the stairs like a warning. The air below was cold and damp. The smell was stronger here. Metal, mildew, something burned long ago. Hannah moved carefully, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Lucy stayed close, her small hand gripping Hannah's sleeve. The beam landed on shelves stacked with boxes, old tools, dust-covered furniture. Then Hannah saw the notebooks. They were hidden inside a plastic bin, carefully sealed. Page after page of tight, anxious handwriting. Dates, names, addresses circled in red. Hannah's chest tightened as she read. Their father had been watching someone. No, several people. He wasn't running away, Hannah whispered, her voice breaking. He was hiding something. Lucy knelt beside a box filled with cassette tapes, each labeled in their father's handwriting. One was marked, "If you find this, I'm sorry." They played it on an old recorder. Their father's voice filled the basement, tired, urgent, terrified. "If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. I found something I wasn't supposed to. I tried to go to the police, but I don't know who I can trust anymore." Hannah's knees went weak. "He stayed," Lucy said softly, "for us." The final box held a folded map, creased and worn. Their house was circled in black ink. Under it, a note written in shaky letters. "This house is the only place they won't look." A sudden sound from upstairs made Hannah snap her head up. A door slamming. Footsteps. Someone was inside the house. Lucy's eyes filled with fear. Hannah pulled her close, her mind racing, instincts sharp and protective. The truth was no longer buried. And now, it knew they were there. Hannah turned off the recorder just as another sound echoed through the house. A door upstairs opened, slow, careful, not the careless noise of an old house settling. This was deliberate. Lucy's fingers tightened around Hannah's sleeve. "Someone's here," she whispered. Hannah's heart pounded, sharp and relentless. She scanned the basement, alert and calculating. There was only one way out, the stairs. Too exposed, too narrow. Her instincts screamed to hide, but another thought cut through the fear. They didn't come for us. They came for what Dad left behind. "Stay quiet," Hannah mouthed. They listened. Footsteps moved across the living room. Drawers opened, something heavy was shifted, then dropped with a dull thud. Whoever it was, they were searching. Hannah felt a surge of anger rise beneath the fear. Hot, protective, undeniable. Her father had died trying to keep them safe, and now strangers were tearing through what little he had left behind. She leaned close to Lucy. "If we run, they'll keep coming," she whispered. "But if we end this, maybe they stop." Lucy looked up at her, eyes wide but steady. For the first time, she didn't look like a scared little girl. She looked resolved. "We tell someone," Lucy said. "We tell everyone." They waited until the footsteps moved toward the back of the house. Then Hannah quietly led Lucy up the basement stairs and out the side door, slipping into the cold afternoon air. The trees stood bare and watchful as they ran toward the nearest neighbor's house, breath burning, hearts racing. The police arrived within the hour. Officers searched the house. No intruder was found, but the evidence in the basement changed everything. The notebooks, the tapes, the map. Faces hardened as they listened, realizing the depth of what Hannah and Lucy had uncovered. "You did the right thing," one officer said, his voice firm but gentle. "You're very brave." That night, they didn't stay in the house. They stayed under protective watch, wrapped in borrowed blankets, exhaustion weighing heavy on their small bodies. Hannah lay awake, her thoughts turbulent and restless. She wondered if her father had felt this same fear, this same terrible certainty, when he realized the truth. Lucy reached for her hand in the dark. "Dad knew we'd be okay," she said softly. "That's why he left it for us." Hannah squeezed back, her resolve solidifying. The danger wasn't over. But neither were they hiding anymore. And somewhere beyond the darkness, the truth was finally starting to move. The truth came out slowly, piece by piece. Over the next several weeks, investigators returned to the house again and again. Hannah watched from the porch as officers carried boxes from the basement. Boxes that had once felt terrifying, now strangely light. The notebooks, the tapes, the map. All the things their father had hidden, hoping one day someone brave enough would find them. The arrests followed quietly. No headlines, no dramatic speeches. Just names removed from the streets and doors that would never open again. Hannah learned that her father had tried to protect more than just his own daughters. He had been trying to stop something dangerous before it spread. He stayed longer than he should have, one detective told her gently, but he saved people. That night, Hannah sat on the front steps with Lucy wrapped in a blanket beside her. The house looked different now. Still old, still scarred, but no longer hostile. The silence felt softer, safer. "I was mad at him," Hannah admitted, her voice low, "for leaving us." Lucy leaned her head against Hannah's shoulder. "He didn't leave," she said. "He made sure we'd survive." The house was repaired slowly. Locks replaced. Windows fixed. Fresh paint covered the peeling walls, but they left the old scratches in the basement untouched. A reminder, a warning, a truth. Social services offered new placements, better schools, safer neighborhoods. Hannah surprised herself by saying no. "We're staying," she said, steady and certain. The house had become more than an inheritance. It was a witness, a promise kept. Months later, Hannah hung a framed photo in the hallway, the only one they had left of their father, restored as best they could. His face looked tired but kind, protective, the kind of man who carried fear quietly so his children wouldn't have to. Lucy added a handwritten note beneath it. "Thank you for keeping us safe." On the first warm night of spring, the girls slept without the lights on for the first time. The house creaked, but it sounded familiar now, almost comforting. Hannah lay awake for a moment, reflective and calm, listening to Lucy's slow breathing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to stay alert. Didn't feel like the world was waiting to take something else from them. They had lost their father, but they had found the truth. And in doing so, they had finally found a home.